A huge thank you to patron Eternal White Moon for suggesting today's video topic. If you want to suggest a topic for next Wednesday's Name Explain video, then all you have to do is support Name Explain on Patreon for $1 a month. Find out more by visiting patreon.com/Name Explain, which will be linked down below. Anyway, we use phrases all of the time in language. These stock sayings are understood by most speakers of a language and are not meant to be taken seriously. If I were to say an example, the cat is out of the bag, then most people would know I meant that something that was being kept secret has been shared publicly. It doesn't mean I've released an actual cat out of an actual bag or anything like that. Phrases are really interesting things, and whilst some have been used for centuries, we still see new ones appearing over time. To lock in, for example, is a phrase meaning to focus on something, which has become super popular recently. Seriously, I can't stop saying to myself I'm locking into this video right now, clearly. But old phrases can even evolve and become used in new and interesting ways. This can best be seen in a phrase which has started to be used in a really interesting new way in more recent years. I'm sure we are all familiar with the phrase of doing the heavy lifting. It means that someone or something has done most of the work on a project or something. In example, if you said John did most of the heavy lifting on the presentation, it would mean that John wrote most of the slides while the other team members just slacked off or something. This is how we've used this phrase for so long, but in more recent years we've been referring to more than just people as doing the heavy lifting. We've been using this phrase in relation to words in a sentence and how much work they do within those sentences. This trend of saying a certain word is doing all the heavy lifting in a sentence is one that has really picked up popularity in the last few years. This can be seen perfectly on social media and in memes. Take this 2023 tweet saying the word chasing is doing the heavy lifting in a post about Formula 1, or even this 2024 meme saying the word black is doing a lot of heavy lifting in this post for a black futon. Even Threads, a social media site people might still be using, I don't know, has posts saying words such as most and made are doing the heavy lifting in their respective sentences, both from 2025. So yeah, I guess people are still using this Threads. Wild, who'd have thought? But anyway, there's even a video I found on Instagram where someone is saying the word may is doing a lot of heavy lifting in a headline about how we may interact with aliens in the future, putting it politely. All these shows how much people have ran away with this idea of a certain word in a sentence doing the heavy lifting. And yeah, it might seem a tad silly to use tweets and memes as references, but honestly, it's in these places where language really evolves and changes in this day and age. Seriously, Twitter, for all its many faults, is like a petri dish for language. Of course, language thriving online is a relatively recent thing in the grand scheme of human history. Most words and phrases came into being with people talking or writing to one another, and that's how exactly we got this phrase of doing the heavy lifting in the first place. We humans have been physically carrying rather heavy things for centuries. Think of things like the pyramids or Stonehenge, and when you realise these were formed with little more than human hands, you will realise, yeah, we have been doing a lot of heavy lifting for a seriously long time. I hope they were bending with their knees, because that wouldn't be good otherwise. Yet despite this, it took us some time to use this term in a more metaphorical sense, and for that phrase of doing all the heavy lifting to really take off. The phrase of heavy lifting has its own entry in the OED, and their earliest recorded use of it comes from 1850, but this meant in a more literal sense. It wouldn't be until 1934 that this idea of doing the heavy lifting was used in a more figurative manner. And it's easy to see why this happened. Someone would have been told they're doing the heavy lifting in a literal way, which would equate to meaning doing all the hard work. And then that concept could easily get applied to doing all the hard work in other places, even if you aren't lifting a finger or breaking the sweat like writing an essay or something. But this means that the phrase of saying someone is doing all the heavy lifting is actually less than 100 years old. And from 1934 until the 21st century, this was seemingly only really used in relation to people and other things doing heavy lifting. It seems to have been in the 2010s that we first started to find evidence of this phrase being used in relation to words. And after scouring the internet for the earliest use of this phrase in relation to words, I found it. I believe the earliest use of it comes from a June 2017 article from TV Guide. Yeah, TV Guide. Sometimes I have to use the most unexpected sources to find answers for these videos. The article was written by someone called Joyce Eng and is part of their Best Performances series, specifically talking about Carrie Coon's performance in the series The Leftovers. In the article, Joyce writes, Kuhn's magnetic ability to paint a vivid world with just words outranks any fantastical sequence that could have been filmed. The mantra is show don't tell, but when you have Kuhn's assured, compelling verbal brushstrokes that were honed in the theatre, where the written word does the heavy lifting, there is no need, never mind the intention to remain vague. This, as far as I could tell, really is the earliest use of the phrase in some way, and it's from just 2017. Granted, it's not in relation to a specific word, but the concept of words doing heavy lifting is on full display here. Huge congratulations to Joyce Eng for being pivotal in this linguistic development. I actually reached out to Joyce to tell her about this and asked if she had any insight into why she used this term, but at the time of recording, she is yet to get back to me. If she does respond, I'll quickly edit in her response at this part of the video. Hello, it's Patrick from the future here. Yeah, still no response from Joyce, I'm afraid, but, well, credit to her, she did invent a term, well, kind of invented the term, the first recorded use of the term, so good for her, I guess, but let's carry on. That was in just 2017, little more than 8 years ago. From here, the concept of words doing the heavy lifting has really exploded, especially in the 2020s. All those aforementioned examples are ones from just the last few years. It really is a phrase that we've taken on board and ran away with, and when we use it in relation to words, it does mean the same thing. Well, kind of anyway. In most cases, when we say a certain word is doing all the heavy lifting, we mean that's doing a lot of work in that sentence. But more often than not, it's used as a joke to imply the rest of the sentence isn't really true. Take that Formula 1 example. The tweet is saying the word chasing is doing the heavy lifting. The joke here is that while Lewis Hamilton is chasing Verstappen for first place, in reality, he hasn't really got any kind of chance of catching up. Hence why the account that made this tweet thinks the word chasing is doing all the hard work, aka heavy lifting. This somewhat ironic use of the phrase in regards to words is seen in other examples too. The reoccurring theme in the modern use of this phrase in relation to words is that it's done almost exclusively for ironic reasons to try and get a couple internet laughs. This really isn't the case when we use this phrase in relation to people. Granted, it can be used ironically, like when you say someone is doing all the heavy lifting, when in reality they aren't doing anything, but the usage of this term is more or less the default when we use it in regards to words these days. And while it's mainly used for ironic reasons, it's super easy to understand how this phrase got applied to words in the first place. Words do way more than just give us their exact meaning. We can use words to subtly imply things and use different words to mean different things. Using a word to do heavy lifting in a sentence is a prime example of how we can use words and language in a far more creative way. And as we mentioned at the top of this video, this is a terrific example of how phrases can evolve. A phrase which started out meaning physically lifting things, to meaning a person metaphorically does a lot of hard work, to it now being used ironically to imply a word is doing way more than it ought to be doing. But perhaps this use of the phrase would die out at some point. One Twitter user even claimed that the phrase doing a lot of heavy lifting is itself doing a lot of heavy lifting these days. You might even argue that making a whole video on this concept is me doing a lot of heavy lifting. But you know what? It's a really cool little look into how the phrases we use can evolve over time. Name Explained depends on viewers like yourself supporting the channel financially on Patreon, so a huge thank you to everyone who does. Donating just $1 a month helps the channel amazingly and gets you bonuses including ad-free videos, exclusive content, the power to request ideas to be made into actual Name Explained videos, and your name at the end of the video with all these awesome people. Visit patreon.com/NameExplain or click the link down below to find out how you too can support the channel. Thank you. Thanks for reaching the end of the video. Why not watch another and subscribe to keep up to date on all things Name Explain. You can find myself on Instagram where I'm NameExplainYT and join the Facebook group Friends of Name Explain to talk with myself and other name nerds. All that will be linked down below. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and once again, thank you all so much.